I bought this house in secret, not because I am wealthy, but because I feared my family would ruin it. On moving day, I found a massive truck in the driveway, and it was not my furniture. My sister's mother-in-law was already claiming rooms while my brother-in-law smirked like the landlord, thanking me for changing their lives. He had no idea I had prepared a legal trap weeks ago, and the steel jaws were about to snap shut. My name is Madison Hudson, and for the last 10 years, I have conditioned myself to expect the worst from the people who share my bloodline. I treated my cynicism like a shield, a necessary armor forged in the fires of unpaid loans and guilt trips. But as I turned my sedan onto the smooth, freshly paved asphalt of Wisteria Way, I allowed myself a dangerous luxury. I allowed myself to feel safe. This was Larkspur Heights. It was a fictional paradise of manicured lawns, HOA regulations that dictated the specific shade of mulch allowed in garden beds, and silence. It was the kind of silence that cost $700,000 and a soul-crushing mortgage rate. It was the silence I had bought to escape the chaotic noise of my family. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. This was it, the culmination of every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, and every lonely dinner over a laptop. I had checked every box on my life list. Detached single-family home, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen island big enough to land a drone on, and most importantly, a location 45 minutes away from my sister, Paige, and her husband, Landon. Then I saw the truck. It was not a sleek, branded vehicle from a reputable moving company. It was a monstrosity of rusted white metal, idling aggressively halfway up my driveway. Black smoke was chugging from its exhaust pipe, staining the pristine air of the neighborhood. The rear gate was yawning open like a hungry mouth, and a ramp had been slapped down onto the concrete I had just paid to have sealed. My heart hammered a warning rhythm against my ribs. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the previous owners had left something behind. But as I coasted closer, cutting the engine, the scene sharpened into a nightmare. Men were marching up my walkway. They were not wearing uniforms. They were wearing stained tank tops and cargo shorts, their skin glistening with sweat. They were hauling furniture, but it was not the mid-century modern collection I had curated over 5 years of scouring estate sales. This furniture was heavy, dark, and aggressively ugly. I watched, paralyzed behind my windshield, as 2 men wrestled a beige, overstuffed leather recliner through my front door. It was the kind of chair that smelled of stale beer and indifference. It was a chair I recognized. It belonged to my brother-in-law. I stepped out of the car. The air, which should have smelled of jasmine and cut grass, smelled of diesel fumes and intrusion. Standing on the top step of my porch, framed by the custom oak double doors I had selected specifically for their security rating, was Landon Pierce. He looked like he was directing traffic at a construction site. He was wearing a polo shirt that was 1 size too small, stretching across his biceps in a way he probably thought was impressive. He was pointing, shouting, and commanding the space as if his name were on the deed. To his right, unfolding a blue plastic tarp directly onto my newly laid sod, were his parents, Russell and Sharon. They were treating my front lawn like a campsite. Russell was already dragging a cooler out of the back of his pickup truck, which was parked diagonally across the cul-de-sac, blocking my mailbox. And there was Travis, Landon's younger brother, sitting on the hood of my car, my actual car that I had just parked, lighting a cigarette. I felt a physical blow to my chest, a mixture of rage and confusion so potent it nearly knocked the wind out of me. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking a sharp staccato on the pavement. "Excuse me," I said, though the words came out like broken glass. A large man carrying a box labeled "kitchen crap" barreled toward me. He did not slow down. He did not apologize. He grunted. "Watch it, lady. We got a schedule to keep." He shouldered past me, forcing me to step onto the grass to avoid being knocked over. The realization hit me instantly. To him, I was the obstacle. In my own home, on my own property, I was the bystander. He assumed I was a neighbor, or perhaps a nuisance. He took his orders from the man on the porch. I reached the steps. Landon turned. He saw me. For a second, I expected shame. I expected the deer-in-headlights look of someone caught breaking and entering. Instead, his face broke into a wide, magnanimous grin. He looked like a host welcoming a guest to a party he was throwing. "Mads," he shouted, throwing his arms wide. "You made it! We were taking bets on whether you would beat traffic." I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. "Landon," I said, my voice dangerously level. "What is that truck doing in my driveway?" "Efficiency, Madison, pure efficiency," he said. Skipping down one step to clap a hand on my shoulder, I flinched away. But he did not notice. "We figured, why wait? Paige is dealing with the paperwork downtown. So I told the boys, let us get the heavy lifting done while Madison is at work. Surprise?" "Surprise?" I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Yeah, look at this crew," he said, gesturing to the men dragging a scratched entertainment center across my threshold. "Got them for a steal on Craigslist. Cash only. No questions asked. That is how you do business, Mads." I walked past him. I had to see it. I had to see the inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the sanctity of the space was gone. I had closed on this house 48 hours ago. I had spent 2 hours just standing in the empty foyer, listening to the quiet. Now, the foyer was a war zone of cardboard boxes and packing tape, but it was the kitchen that broke me. My kitchen. The island was a single slab of Calicut gold marble. It had cost more than my first car. I had treated it with a sealant that promised to repel wine and oil. But the manufacturer instructions had said nothing about disrespect. 3 open pizza boxes sat directly on the stone. Grease stains were already blooming on the cardboard, seeping downward. A 2-liter bottle of generic orange soda was sitting there, cap off, with no coaster. A red plastic cup had been overturned, and a sticky puddle was inching toward the edge of the counter. Sharon, Landon's mother, was standing by the sink. She was unwrapping newspaper from a porcelain figurine, a clown with a tear on its cheek. She looked up and beamed. "Oh, Em, you are here," she chirped. "We are just setting up. I told Landon we should wait for you. But you know how men are. They just want to get things done." She wiped her hands on her jeans and gestured around the room. "We put the sofa in the great room, but I think the lighting is better for it in the den. What do you think?" "What do I think?" I asked. I felt like I was speaking a different language. "Sharon, why is your sofa in my house?" She laughed. A light, tinkling sound that dismissed my question entirely. "Oh, stop it. You have so much space here. It is silly for you to rattle around in this big old place all by yourself. Besides, family supports family. That is what we do." I looked at the pizza grease. I looked at the movers scratching my hardwood floors with their heavy boots. I looked at the clown figurine staring at me from the counter. This was not a visit. This was an occupation. Landon walked in behind me, grabbing a slice of cold pizza. He took a bite, chewing with his mouth open. "Look, Mads, do not stress," he said, crumbs falling onto my floor. "We are doing you a favor. This house, it is too much for a single woman to manage. Maintenance, security, yard work. We are going to take that load off your shoulders." "I did not ask for help," I said. My hand drifted to my pocket. I needed a record. I needed proof. I unlocked my phone and tapped the voice memo app, then switched to video. I held the phone against my chest, lens facing out, keeping my movements fluid and unobtrusive. "You never ask. That is your problem," Landon said, leaning back against the island. He looked around the room with a proprietary air. "This location is perfect. By the way, I have some investors flying in next month for the tech startup I told you about. Bringing them here, to a place like this, it shows stability. It shows wealth. It is going to close the deal." "You are going to host meetings in my house?" I asked, angling my body so the camera caught the movers' faces, the boxes, the damage to the floor. "Our house. For now," Landon corrected. "Just until we get back on our feet. Maybe 6 months. A year tops. Once the startup takes off, we will buy a place twice this size. And hey, You get live-in security. Dad is great at watching the perimeter. I looked out the window. Russell was currently urinating on the side of my garage. I turned back to Landon. Get out, I said. It was not a scream. It was a statement of fact. Tell your movers to put every single box back on that truck. Tell your parents to get off my lawn. You have 1 hour before I call the police. The room went quiet. The mover in the hallway stopped wrestling with a mattress. Sharon froze with another clown in her hand. Landon did not look scared. He looked disappointed. He sighed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. I was hoping you would be cool about this. Madison, I really was. I told Paige. Your sister is stiff, but she is reasonable. Guess I was wrong. Get out, I repeated. I cannot do that, Landon said calmly. Movers are paid, truck is unloaded, and besides, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He tapped the screen a few times, his movements slow and deliberate. You act like this is a surprise, he said, walking closer to me. He held the phone up to my face. But we have an agreement, legally binding. On the screen was a PDF document. It was titled Residential Lease Agreement. I scanned the lines quickly. The tenant was listed as Landon Pierce. The landlord was listed as Madison Hudson. The term was 5 years. The rent was listed as $1 per month. My eyes shot to the bottom of the page. There, in digital black ink, was a signature. It looped the M exactly the way I did. It crossed the H with the specific flair I had developed in college. It was my signature, but I had never seen this document in my life. You signed it, Landon said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Digital signature, IP address verified. You sent it over last Tuesday, remember? You were so worried about us losing the apartment. You said, Landon, take the house. I just want to help. I stared at him. The gaslighting was so brazen, so absolute, that the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. He was not just squatting. He had manufactured a reality where I had invited him in. I never signed that, I said. Landon shrugged, slipping the phone back into his pocket. That is not what the court will think. And right now, possession is 9/10 of the law. So, if I were you, I would grab a slice of pizza and help Mom unpack. This is happening whether you like it or not. He turned his back on me and shouted at the movers. Careful with that TV. That is an 80-inch OLED. Do not scratch it. I stood there, the sounds of the invasion washing over me. The recording on my phone was still running. I looked at the pizza grease soaking into the marble. I looked at the smile on Sharon's face as she placed the clown on my mantel. I looked at Landon, playing the Lord of the Manor. They thought they had won. They thought they had trapped me with a fake PDF and a moving truck. They thought Madison Hudson was just the quiet, single sister who wrote checks and looked the other way. I lowered my phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it into my pocket. I did not scream. I did not cry. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of pepperoni and betrayal. Okay, I whispered to no one but myself. Okay. They wanted a war. They had just moved their entire army into the kill zone, and they had no idea that I was the one holding the detonator. To understand why the sight of Landon eating pizza on my marble countertop felt like a physical violation, you have to understand where the money for that marble came from. It did not come from a trust fund. It did not come from a lucky scratch-off ticket or a divorce settlement. It came from mud, concrete, and the unrelenting exhaustion of working for Marrowline Infrastructure Group. For the past 7 years, my alarm has gone off at 4 a.m. While the rest of the world is sleeping in soft beds, I am pulling on steel-toed boots and a high-visibility vest that never quite fits right because they do not design them for women with hips. I am a project manager in heavy civil construction. That sounds impressive on LinkedIn, but in reality, it means I spend 12 hours a day standing in trenches, arguing with union foremen who think I'm a diversity hire, and inhaling enough silica dust to coat my lungs in a permanent layer of grit. I have spent my 30s screaming over the roar of excavators. I have reviewed blueprints until my eyes burned and my vision blurred. I have missed birthdays, weddings, and holidays, Because a retaining wall in a county 2 hours away was failing and I was the only one who could sign off on the fix. I have been called every name in the book by men who could not handle taking orders from a woman, and I learned to stare them down until they looked away first. Every dollar that went into the down payment for the house at Larkspur Heights was a dollar I had bled for. I did not live like a project manager making a 6-figure salary. I lived like a college student who was terrified of tuition hikes. I drove a 10-year-old sedan with a cracked bumper. I packed a turkey sandwich for lunch every single day for 6 years. I never bought the designer bags my sister Paige collected. I never went on the girls' trips to Tulum or Cabo. Instead, I stayed home and taught myself forensic accounting and real estate law. I watched the numbers in my high-yield savings account tick upward, agonizingly slow, until they finally formed a shield big enough to protect me. That shield was supposed to be this house, my family. However, operates on a different economic philosophy, to the Hudsons, and especially to the Pierces. Money is not something you earn and save, it is something you perform. My sister Paige is 2 years older than me, and she has always been the golden child. She is the one who remembers birthdays. She is the one who knows how to arrange flowers and host a dinner party without burning the roast. She married Landon Pierce right out of college, and for a decade, they have been playing a very convincing game of pretend. Landon is a man who speaks exclusively in buzzwords. He is never just unemployed. He is always between ventures. He is never broke. He is illiquid. Over the years, I have watched him cycle through every get-rich-quick scheme that has ever graced the internet. There was the dropshipping phase, where their garage was filled with cheap yoga mats from overseas that smelled like gasoline. There was the cryptocurrency phase, where he lost $30,000 of his parents' retirement fund in a single weekend, but claimed he was holding for the long term. There was the boutique coffee roasting business that failed, because he forgot to apply for a health permit. Through it all, Paige stood by him, smiling her perfect smile, wearing clothes she bought on credit cards that were maxed out. She would call me, her voice dropping to that breathy, desperate register I had learned to dread. She would say that they just needed a bridge loan. She would say that Landon was on the verge of a breakthrough and they just needed to cover the mortgage for 2 months. She would say that if I did not help, they would lose everything, and surely I could afford it because I was single and had no real expenses. And for a long time, I did help. I wrote the checks. I paid the bills. I let them use my credit score to co-sign for a car that Landon eventually crashed. I let them use my address to get their kids into a better school district, a small fraud that kept me awake at night for 3 years. I stopped helping 18 months ago. That was when I found out Landon had been using my name to solicit investors for a phantom tech startup. He had told people that Madison Hudson, the project manager at Marrowline, was his silent partner. He was trading on my professional reputation, the one thing I had built entirely on my own, to scam retirees out of their pension checks. When I confronted him, he laughed. He said I should be flattered. He said I was too uptight. That was the day I decided to buy the house in secret. I knew that if they knew I had assets, they would come for them. If they knew I had a guest room, they would fill it. If they knew I had space, they would consume it. I needed a fortress where they could not reach me. I needed a place where the mailbox only had my name on it. But I made one fatal calculation error. I underestimated my mother. Carol Hudson believes that family is a single organism with a shared stomach. If one person eats, everyone should be full. If one person starves, everyone should hunger. But in practice, this communism only applies to me. I am the reservoir from which the others drink. 2 weeks before the closing, I was having lunch with my mother. I was exhausted. My defenses were down, and I made the mistake of showing her a picture of the entryway on my phone. I saw the glint in her eye. It was not pride. It was calculation. She immediately asked how many bedrooms it had. She asked if there was an in-law suite. I shut it down immediately. I told her it was small. I told her it was a fixer-upper. I told her I wanted privacy. Privacy? She had scoffed, picking at her salad. You are 34 years old. Madison, what do you need privacy for? You are all alone. It is selfish to hoard all that space when your sister is struggling. Landon is trying so hard, and you know their apartment is cramped. I work hard too, Mom, I had said, hearing the familiar petulance in my own voice. It is different, she dismissed. You do not have a family to support. You have so much, and you share so little. It breaks my heart. She worked on me for an hour. She cried a little. She talked about how she worried about me being alone in a big house. What if I slipped in the shower? What if there was a leak while I was at work? And then came the request, the small, reasonable request that is the hallmark of every great con. Just give me a spare key, she said, wiping her eyes. Just for emergencies. Or if you need me to water the plants when you are on those long shifts at the site, I will not tell Paige, I promise. It will just be for my peace of mind. I looked at her. She was my mother. She had aged in the last few years, the stress of Paige's financial instability carving lines into her face. I felt that old, heavy guilt settle in my stomach. I was the strong one. I was the capable one. Denying her a key felt like an act of cruelty. So, against every alarm bell ringing in my head, I reached into my purse. I handed her the shiny new brass key I had just received from the seller. Do not give this to Landon, I told her sternly. Do not give this to Paige. If I see them there, I am changing the locks. Of course, Madison, she said, clutching the key like a rosary. I would never betray your trust. I remember driving away from that lunch feeling a knot of nausea in my throat. It felt like I had just handed a loaded gun to a toddler. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that my mother just wanted to feel useful. I told myself that boundaries could be managed. I was a fool. I did not know then that the key was the least of my problems. I assumed she would use it to let herself in and maybe rearrange my furniture, or leave a passive-aggressive note about the lack of food in the fridge. I thought the worst-case scenario was an unannounced visit. I did not know that while I was at work, standing in the mud and shouting at crane operators, my mother was not just making copies of the key. I did not know that she had taken the folder of documents I had foolishly left on the table during that lunch, the folder containing the preliminary title work, the utility account numbers, and the deed transfer forms. She did not just open the door for them, she handed them the blueprints to my life. She gave Landon the raw data he needed to construct the lease agreement he shoved in my face. She gave him the account numbers to switch the electricity and water into his name. She weaponized my trust and handed the ammunition to the very people I was trying to escape. As I stood in my kitchen, listening to Landon claim he was doing me a favor, the memory of that lunch played back in my mind. I saw my mother's tears. I saw her trembling hand take the key, and I realized that the emergency she was worried about was not me slipping in the shower. The emergency was that her golden son-in-law needed a new host to parasitize, and she had decided that I was the perfect donor. I had built a fortress, but I had given the gate codes to the enemy, and now I had to burn the whole thing down to get them out. Where is my sister? My voice did not echo. The acoustic dampenings of the house, the plush rugs I had not yet rolled out, the curtains I had not yet hung, were being substituted by the dense, suffocating volume of Landon's possessions. I stared directly at his forehead, refusing to engage with the smug smile plastered on his lips. Landon took a slow sip of his soda, the carbonation hissing in the sudden silence between us. He gestured vaguely toward the front door with the hand holding the red plastic cup. Paige, she is out. You know how it is with new moves, logistics. She is down at the county clerk's office, handling the registration for the kids' new school district. Then I think she was stopping by the utility company. The online portal was glitching, so she went in person to make sure the lights stay on in our name. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. This was not a visit. You do not register children for school during a visit. You do not put utilities in your name for a weekend crash. He spoke of my home as if it were already a conquered territory, and my sister was the diplomat sent to finalize the treaty. This is not your district, I said, my voice low and hard. This is not your utility account. Call her. Tell her to stop. Tell her to come here immediately." Sharon, Landon's mother, stepped out from behind a wall of cardboard boxes labeled linens. She was holding a ceramic rooster that I recognized from their foreclosure sale 3 years ago. She clutched it to her chest as if it were a holy relic. "Madison, honey, lower your voice," Sharon scolded, her tone dripping with that sickly sweet condescension she reserved for people she considered beneath her moral standing. "The movers are working. You are going to distract them. Besides, why are you being so hostile? Look at this place. It is enormous." She swept her arm around my living room, nearly knocking over a lamp I had bought in Milan. 4 bedrooms. Madison," she continued, shaking her head as if baffled by a math problem. 4 bedrooms and 3 baths for one person? It is wasteful. It is practically a sin to have this much roof over one head when your family is squeezed into a 2-bedroom apartment. Family is supposed to stand shoulder to shoulder, not miles apart. "It is my house," I snapped, turning my glare on her. "I paid for every square inch of this waste. I did not buy it to run a shelter for your son's bad decisions." From the patio door, a gravelly laugh cut through the tension. Russell, Landon's father, leaned against the doorframe. He had found a toothpick somewhere and was working it aggressively between his front teeth. He looked me up and down with a sneer that made my skin crawl. "Careful now, little lady," Russell said. "A woman your age, living alone in a fortress like this? People talk. They see a single female rattling around a big house, and they start wondering what is wrong with her, or what she is hiding. A house needs a man to run it, needs noise, needs life. You keeping it empty like a museum? It just looks sad. We are doing you a favor by making it look respectable." I felt the heat rise up my neck, a volatile mix of humiliation and fury. They were attacking my womanhood to justify their theft. It was a classic tactic. If they could make me feel small, unnatural, and defective for being successful and single, they could frame their intrusion as a benevolent act of correction. I turned back to Landon. "I am not going to debate my lifestyle with you. I want you out. Now." Landon sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a tantruming toddler. He set the cup down on my island, no coaster, of course, and walked around the counter to stand in my personal space. "Madison, look at the big picture," he said, spreading his hands. "I am on the verge of closing the Series A funding for the platform. I told you about this. The investors are old school. They value stability. They value collateral. When they see I am residing at this address, when they see the Pierce name associated with Larkspur Heights, the checkbooks open, boom, just like that." He snapped his fingers in my face. I didn't blink. "And once that money hits," he went on, his eyes gleaming with the mania of the perpetual gambler, "I am going to take care of you. Seriously, we will pay you back for the inconvenience. Consider this. Rent credits. We are just using the address to anchor the deal. We sleep here, we look the part, and in 6 months, we are gone. We will buy the place next door. Heck, I will buy you a new car, a Tesla. You want a Tesla?" "I do not want a Tesla. Landon, I want my house." "We are helping you maximize your asset," he insisted, his voice rising. "This is leverage. You are sitting on a gold mine and treating it like a storage unit. I am offering to turn it into an active investment vehicle. When I win, you win." "You never win," I said. It was cruel, but it was the truth. "You just drag everyone else down to the bottom with you." Landon's face tightened. The friendly mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the petty, desperate narcissist underneath. But before he could retort, a massive crash echoed from the hallway. I spun around. 2 movers were trying to jam a wide, ugly oak dresser through the narrow archway leading to the guest bedrooms. The corner of the dresser gouged a deep, white scratch into the gray paint I had selected after weeks of deliberation. "Stop!" I screamed. I marched toward the movers. "Put that down. Stop moving things in. I did not authorize this." The lead mover, a man with a neck tattoo and eyes that said he was being underpaid, paused. He looked at me, then looked at Landon. "Boss?" the mover asked. She says stop. Clock is ticking. Landon waved his hand dismissively. Ignore her. She is just having pre-move jitters. Keep going. I want the master bedroom set up before sunset. No. I block the hallway, standing physically between the dresser and the room. I am the owner of this house. My name is on the deed. I am telling you to cease and desist immediately. If you move one more piece of furniture, I will sue your company for trespassing and property damage. The mover hesitated. He set the dresser down with a heavy thud on my hardwood floor. He looked at Landon. Look, man, I do not get paid enough for domestic disputes. Is she the owner or not? Landon laughed, but it was forced. She is the owner on paper, sure, but I am the tenant, and I have rights. You are not a tenant, I shouted. You are an intruder. Time is money, Madison, Landon barked. Dropping the nice guy act, these guys are charging me $200 an hour. Every minute you stand there yapping is costing me, and by extension, the family, money we do not have to waste. Do you want to be the reason the kids do not get Christmas presents this year because you made the movers wait? I want you to leave, I said, holding my ground. I want to know how you even got in here. I changed the locks the day I closed. I have the only keys. The room went silent again. Sharon, who was busy arranging a collection of porcelain thimbles on my floating shelves, stopped. She looked at me, then at Landon, then shrugged. Oh, for heaven's sake. Madison, Sharon said, her voice light and airy, as if discussing the weather. Your mother gave us the key. She said you wouldn't mind. She said you gave it to her for safekeeping. And what is safer than family? I felt the air leave my lungs. I had suspected it. I had feared it, but hearing it confirmed was like taking a knife to the gut. My mother, the woman who had sworn she just wanted to water my plants, she hadn't just betrayed my trust. She had handed the executioner the axe. Mom gave it to you? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. She understands, Landon said, regaining his swagger now that the secret was out. She knows that Paige and I just need a little runway. Carol is a visionary. She sees the potential in what I am building, unlike you. She gave you the key, I said. But she could not have given you the right to be here. That is breaking and entering. Possession of a key does not equal a lease. Landon reached into his back pocket again. He pulled out the phone he had brandished earlier. He tapped the screen and held it up, shoving it inches from my nose. You keep using words you do not understand, Landon sneered. Breaking and entering? Please, we have a contract, a valid, executed lease agreement. I looked at the screen. I forced my eyes to focus on the glowing pixels. It was a standard residential lease template, the kind you can download for free online, but the details were filled in with terrifying precision. Property address: 104 Wisteria Way, Larkspur Heights. Tenant: Landon Pierce. Landlord: Madison Hudson. Start date: today. Rent: $1 per month. And there, at the bottom, was the signature. It was not a digital font. It was not a rough approximation. It was my signature. It had the sharp loop on the M that I adopted in my 20s. It had the specific, jagged underline I used when signing checks. It was identical to the signature on my driver's license. It was identical to the signature on the closing documents I had signed just days ago. It was so perfect that for a split second, I questioned my own sanity. Had I signed this? Had I blacked out from stress and agreed to this madness? No, I knew I hadn't. That is a forgery, I said, looking up at him. You traced it, or you lifted it from a document my mother gave you. Landon pulled the phone back and slipped it into his pocket. He winked, a cold, dead wink. Prove it, he said softly. As far as the law is concerned, you signed it. You agreed to let us live here for 5 years for a nominal fee. You want to call the cops? Go ahead. Show them the deed. I will show them the lease. Do you know what they will say? They will say it is a civil matter. They will say they cannot evict a tenant with a signed contract without a court order. And do you know how long eviction courts in this state take to process a case? 6 months, maybe 12 if I have a good lawyer, and I am a lawyer's worst nightmare. Madison, I know just enough to drag things out until the sun burns out. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of my soda and my pizza. So here's your choice. You can scream and cry and waste thousands of dollars on legal fees trying to kick out your own sister and her children. You can look like the heartless, bitter spinster who hates her family. Or you can accept the reality. We are here, we are staying, and there is not a damn thing you can do about it today. He turned back to the movers, clapping his hands. All right, boys, break is over. Let's get that sectional into the den. Pivot, pivot. I stood there, watching the movers heave the dresser up again. The scratching sound of wood against paint felt like it was happening inside my skull. This wasn't a mooching relative looking for a couch to surf on. This wasn't a temporary inconvenience. This was a heist. Landon hadn't just moved in. He had constructed a legal bear trap, baited it with family guilt, and snapped it around my ankle the moment I walked through the door. He had planned this. He had prepared the fake lease, the utility switch, the school registration. He intended to bury me in paperwork and civil matters while he lived in my luxury and drained my resources. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought the piece of paper in his pocket was a shield I couldn't penetrate. I looked at Sharon, who was humming to herself as she rearranged my mantelpiece. I looked at Russell, who was tracking mud onto my carpet. I looked at Landon, acting like the king of a castle he didn't own. They thought this was the end of the conversation. They were wrong. It was just the opening statement. I turned around and walked out the front door, not saying another word. Landon called out after me, "Going to get us more ice?" "Thanks. Mads?" I did not answer. I walked down the driveway, past the leaking truck, and got into my car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of absolute clarity. Landon was right about one thing. The police wouldn't arrest him for a civil dispute. Not yet. But he had made one critical mistake. He assumed that because I was family, I would play by family rules. He assumed I would keep this private to save face. He assumed I was the same Madison who had paid his credit card bills to keep the peace. He didn't know that Madison Hudson died the moment I saw that signature. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number. It wasn't the police. Not yet. "Crest Point Title Services," the automated voice answered. "Connect me to the fraud department," I said to the machine. "Immediately." I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the sweat that had broken out on my forehead. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers felt numb. I was not leaving. I was retreating to my command center. I dialed the number for Crest Point Title Services. It was a local number I had memorized during the escrow process. I needed a human being, not an automated system. I needed to know if the ground I was standing on still legally belonged to me. "Crest Point Title. This is Sarah," a voice answered after 2 rings. "Sarah, this is Madison Hudson. I just closed on 104 Wisteria Way 3 days ago, file number 4492 Alpha." I rattled off the information with the precision of a soldier reporting for duty. "I need you to pull my file, right now." "One moment. Ms. Hudson," she said, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. "Okay, I have it here. Congratulations on the new home. How can I help you?" "I need you to tell me who is listed on the title," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "Just me, correct?" "Yes. Madison Hudson, sole owner, fee simple." "Has there been any activity on the file since closing? Any requests for copies? Any inquiries?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that made my stomach turn over. "Well, that is odd," Sarah said slowly. "There is a note here from yesterday afternoon. A request came in through our online portal to update the contact information for the deed record. Someone wanted to change the mailing address for property tax statements." "Change it to what?" I demanded. "To a post office box in downtown," she said. "Box 772. I closed my eyes. That was Landon's P.O. box. He used it for his shell company so creditors could not find his physical address. "I did not authorize that," I said. my voice dropping to a whisper. That was not me. I need you to flag that immediately. Do not process any changes. Do not send any documents to that address. Okay, I am flagging it now as potential fraud, Sarah said, her tone shifting from professional to concerned. Ms. Hudson, is everything all right? No, I said. I think someone is trying to steal my house from the inside out. Keep the file open. I might need you again in 5 minutes. I ended the call and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I needed to see the damage. I needed to see the extent of the infection. I stepped out of the car. The movers were still heaving boxes into the house, but the flow had slowed down. They were taking a break, smoking cigarettes on my lawn. I walked past them, ignoring their leers, and headed for the garage. I had staged my own move carefully. My boxes, labeled with color-coded tape, blue for the master bath, yellow for the kitchen, green for the office, had been stacked neatly against the north wall of the garage 2 days ago. I had organized them by priority. Now, that order was annihilated. My boxes had been shoved into a chaotic pile in the corner. Some of them crushed under the weight of foreign objects. A bag of rusty golf clubs was thrown on top of my box of vintage glassware. A lawnmower that leaked oil was pushed against a carton containing my winter coats. They had treated my possessions like garbage to make room for their own. I walked into the house through the garage door. The hallway smelled of stale tobacco and cheap cologne. I moved silently, my sneakers making no sound on the hardwood. I needed to see the master bedroom. That was the heart of the home. That was my sanctuary. The door to the master suite was open. I stopped at the threshold, and the breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. It was gone. My vision of a serene, minimalist retreat with crisp white linens and soft lighting was gone. In its place was a heavy, dark wood bedroom set that looked like it belonged in a haunted Victorian hotel. The bed was unmade, a tangle of gray sheets that looked unwashed. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Men's jeans, oversized t-shirts, a pile of unmatched socks on the nightstand. But it was the walls that made me sick. They had already hammered nails into the pristine drywall. A large, framed poster of a sports car hung crookedly over the bed. A TV mount had been hastily drilled into the plaster, dust covering the floorboards below. They had not just moved in, they had claimed the territory. They had urinated on the corners of the room to mark it as theirs. I backed away, feeling bile rise in my throat. I pulled my phone out again. I needed to check the security system. I had installed a high-end video doorbell and 2 perimeter cameras the day I got the keys. I tapped the app icon, device offline, all of them, the doorbell, the driveway camera, the backyard sensor. They were all grayed out. Smart, I whispered to myself. Very smart. To disable the system, you needed physical access to the hub or the Wi-Fi password. The hub was in the utility closet. The password was on a sticker on the router. They had found both. They had blinded me. They had cut the eyes out of my house so I could not watch the invasion. I walked back out the front door, needing fresh air. As I stood on the porch, trying to stop my hands from shaking, I saw a woman walking a golden retriever across the street. She slowed down, looking at the moving truck, then at me. It was Nora. I had met her briefly during the final walkthrough. She was the neighborhood watch captain, a woman who knew exactly when trash cans should be put out and when they should be brought in. She crossed the street, her face pinched with concern. "Madison?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Is everything okay? I thought you were moving in next week." "I was," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "There has been a change of plans." Nora stepped closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I saw them pull up at 6 in the morning. Before the sun was even fully up, it was incredibly loud. The truck backfired and woke up my husband. 6 in the morning, they had struck at dawn. And," Nora continued, glancing nervously at the open front door, "I saw the man, the one in the tight shirt, on the phone. He was calling the homeowners association. I heard him give them your address. He told them he was the new primary resident and needed to register his vehicle for the gate code. My blood ran cold. The gate code. If Landon had the gate code, he could come and go as he pleased. He could give it to his friends. He could give it to his investors. Did he give his name? I asked. Landon Pierce, Nora said. He sounded very authoritative. He told the property manager that you were his sister and that you had purchased the home as a family investment property. He made it sound like you were just the silent partner. Thank you, Nora, I said. That is very helpful information. If you need anything, she said, squeezing my arm. If you need me to call the police. Not yet, I said. But keep your eyes open for me. She nodded and walked away. Pulling her dog along, I turned back toward the house. I had to know more. I had to know the end game. I circled around the side of the house, staying close to the hedges. The dining room window was open. I could hear voices inside. It was Landon and his younger brother, Travis. I crouched down, pressing my back against the brickwork. Dude, this place is insane, Travis was saying. The acoustics in here? We could set up the podcast studio in the den. It would look legit. Forget the podcast, Landon's voice cut in, sharp and dismissive. Think bigger. Travis, do you know what an address like Larkspur Heights does for a credit application? I just updated my profile on the business loan portal. As soon as the utility bills hit with this address, I am going to refinance the truck, maybe pull a line of credit for the startup. But what about Madison? Travis asked. She looked pretty pissed. Landon laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Let her be pissed. What is she going to do? Drag her own mother out in handcuffs? She is too soft. She is too worried about what people think. She will huff and puff. But eventually, she will fold. She always folds. And by the time she figures out how to get us out, we will have already leveraged the equity. Leveraged the equity? Travis asked, sounding confused. But it is her house. Possession, little brother, Landon said. It is all about possession. If we are here, and the bills are in our name, and the neighbors see us, we are the reality. She is just a piece of paper. I stood up slowly. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. This wasn't just about a free place to stay. This was identity theft on a massive scale. They were using the physical house to validate a fraudulent financial persona. They were going to run up debts using my address, destroying my credit and my reputation in the process. They were going to bleed the property dry before I could even unpack a single box. I pulled my phone out again. I had one more notification I had missed in the chaos. I swiped down on my screen. It was an email from a generic address. Admin Larks Per Utilities. Com. Subject. Account confirmation. I opened it. Dear Madison Hudson, thank you for setting up your new account. Your service has been transferred effectively today. Please note that your autopay has been set up with the checking account ending in 4491. I stared at the numbers. 4491. That wasn't my bank account. That was Landon's account. But the utility account was in my name. He had set it up so the bills would come to me. But the payment method was his. Temporarily, it created a link. It proved we were financially entangled. It was a masterful stroke of manipulation. If I shut off the power, I was shutting off power to a tenant who was paying the bill. It would look like an illegal eviction. He had thought of everything. Or rather, he had Googled everything about how to squat successfully. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Sarah from Crest Point Title again. Ms. Hudson? Her voice was tight, urgent. I am here. Sarah, what is it? I decided to run a search on the county clerk's pending file index, just to be safe. It is the system that tracks documents that have been submitted but not yet fully recorded. And there is a submission from this morning, time-stamped 8:30 a.m. It is a quitclaim deed. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A quitclaim deed was used to transfer ownership interest from one person to another. It was fast, it was simple, and it was the weapon of choice for property fraudsters. Who is the grantee? I asked. Who are they trying to transfer it to? It is a request to add a name to the title, Sarah said. It lists Madison Hudson as the grantor, and it lists Landon Pierce as the grantee, joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. I leaned against the brick wall of my own house to keep from falling over. He is trying to put himself on the deed, I whispered. If this gets recorded, Sarah said, her voice grave. He legally owns half the house. He can take out loans against it. He can sell his half. He can never be evicted. Can you stop it? I asked. Sarah, tell me you can stop it. I can flag it. I can call the clerk and tell them it is contested. But if the signature looks real, Madison, they might process it before we can get a judge to look at it. The signature, I said, remembering the PDF on Landon's phone. He has my signature. You need to get down to the county recorder's office, Sarah said. Now, you need to file an affidavit of forgery. If that deed goes through, this stops being a trespassing case and starts being a partition lawsuit, and that takes years. I hung up. I looked at the window where Landon was laughing about his genius. He didn't just want to live here. He wanted to steal half my net worth with a photocopied signature and a filing fee. He wasn't a squatter. He was a hijacker. I walked back to my car. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I moved with the cold. Mechanical precision of a machine that had just been switched to destroy mode. I got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I looked at the house one last time. It looked the same as it had yesterday. Stucco walls, tile roof, black trim, but now it looked like a battlefield. You want to play legal games, Landon? I said to the dashboard. Fine, let's play. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going to the police station. I was going to the one place that could cut off his oxygen supply before he took another breath. I was going to the source of the money, and I was going to burn his bridge before he could even step onto it. I closed the car door with a deliberate, soft click. The heavy thud of metal on metal would have betrayed my anger, and anger was a luxury I could no longer afford. Anger was messy. Anger was loud. Anger was exactly what Landon expected, and it was the fuel he used to paint me as the hysterical, unstable sister who hated family. I needed to be something else. I needed to be ice. I walked back up the driveway, smoothing the front of my blazer. My reflection in the side mirror of the moving truck showed a woman who looked defeated. My shoulders were slumped, my head slightly bowed. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Inside, my heart was beating with the cold, rhythmic precision of a ticking bomb, but on the outside, I was the picture of resignation. Landon was still in the foyer, directing the placement of a scratched coffee table. When he saw me, his chest puffed out. He was ready for round 2. He was ready for the screaming match that would end with him playing the victim. Back for more? He asked, a smirk playing on his lips. I told you, Madison, the law is on my side. I stopped in the center of the room and let out a long, shaky exhale. I looked at the floor, then up at him, keeping my eyes wide and watery. You win, I said softly. The silence that followed was absolute. The mover holding the other end of the coffee table froze. Sharon stopped unwrapping a hideous ceramic cat. Landon blinked, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. Excuse me? He said, suspicious. I said you win, I repeated, forcing my voice to tremble just enough. I called my lawyer. He said that with the signed lease, it is a civil matter. He said it would take months to fight it, and the legal fees would be astronomical. I wiped a non-existent tear from my cheek. I cannot afford that. Landon, I just put every penny I have into the down payment. Landon's face transformed. The suspicion evaporated, replaced by the gloating radiance of total victory. He looked at his mother, then back at me, spreading his arms wide. See? He said, his voice booming. I told you, Mom. Madison is reasonable. She just needed a minute to process the logic of it all. He walked over and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. I had to fight every instinct in my body not to recoil. I am proud of you, Mads. Really. You are making the right choice for the family. I just need some time, I said, looking down at my shoes. Please, just give me 30 minutes to... to mentally rearrange things, to figure out where my stuff goes if you're taking the master bedroom. Take all the time you need, Landon said, magnanimous in his triumph. We are not monsters. We are family. I nodded and stepped away from him. Okay, I will just help the movers. Make sure things do not get damaged. Great, Landon said, already turning back to his mother. Mom, where's the cooler? I need a beer. I turned to the movers. This was the first step of the trap. I knew exactly where the blind spots were in my house, and I knew exactly where the lenses were. The system was currently offline because they had disconnected the internet, but they did not know about the failsafe. I had installed a localized backup system, a series of high-capacity SD cards in the cameras themselves that recorded on a loop even when the Wi-Fi was cut. Powered by internal batteries that lasted 48 hours. They weren't broadcasting to my phone anymore, but they were watching. They were remembering. Excuse me, I said to the lead mover, a burly man with a sweat-stained bandana. My brother-in-law is busy. I need you to stack the electronics in the den, specifically in the corner by the bookshelf. That corner was directly in the crosshairs of the wide-angle lens hidden in the smoke detector. And the boxes with the financial documents? I pointed to a stack of crates Landon had brought in. Those should go in the hallway, right under the skylight. It is safer there. Right under the motion sensor camera that captured high-definition video of anyone passing through. The mover shrugged. Whatever you say, lady. Just tell us where to drop it. I spent the next 10 minutes choreographing the placement of their lives. I made sure they placed Landon's laptop bag, his filing cabinet, and his lockbox in clear view of the silent, recording eyes. I was building a timeline. I was creating a visual inventory of their invasion. Once the stage was set, I retreated to the powder room on the first floor. It was the only room with a heavy solid core door that locked from the inside. I turned the lock and sank onto the closed toilet lid. My hands flew across the screen of my phone. I wasn't calling the police. I was calling the one person who could turn this mess into a weapon. Avery Kincaid. He was a real estate attorney I had consulted briefly during the closing process when I had a question about property easements. He was expensive, sharp, and had a reputation for destroying opponents who tried to play dirty. I typed out a message. Urgent. Emergency at the new property. Identity theft. Forgery. Active trespassing. I need you now. I hit send. Then I started uploading. I sent him the video I had taken of Landon admitting to the setup. I sent him the photo of the mover's truck and license plate. I sent him the screenshot of the utility transfer email. And most importantly, I described the PDF lease agreement Landon had flashed in my face. He has a lease with my signature. I typed, I never signed it. He also filed a quitclaim deed this morning trying to add himself to the title. I have confirmed this with Crestpoint. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Avery. Do not call. His text read, If you're in the house, stay off the voice line. They might hear you. This is not a landlord-tenant dispute. Madison, this is a sophisticated fraud scheme. If he filed a quitclaim, he is trying to establish an ownership interest before the police arrive. He is trying to muddy the waters so the cops walk away. I want to call a locksmith. I texted back. I want to wait until they go out for dinner. Drill the locks, throw their stuff on the lawn, and barricade myself inside. The 3 dots of his typing bubble appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. No, came the reply. Absolutely not. If you do that, you give him the ammunition to claim illegal eviction. He has a lease, even if it is fake. A beat cop on a Saturday night does not have the training to verify forensic handwriting. If you lock him out, he sues you. He wins temporary access. He stays for months. I stared at the screen, frustration burning in my chest. So I just let him steal my house? No, Avery replied. We let him hang himself. We need one more piece of evidence to bridge the gap between civil dispute and criminal felony. We need proof of financial theft occurring right now, not just the utilities, something tangible. Who is paying the movers? I paused. Who was paying the movers? Landon had said he got them for cash on Craigslist, but later he mentioned a receipt, and Landon never paid cash if he could use credit. Usually someone else's credit. I will find out. I typed, "Be careful." Avery wrote, "Do not spook them. You are playing the defeated sister. Keep playing it." I flushed the toilet to create noise, washed my hands, and unlocked the door. I checked my face in the mirror. I looked pale, which was perfect. I walked back out into the chaos. The lead mover was standing by the kitchen island, holding a digital tablet and looking annoyed. Landon was nowhere to be seen, probably in the backyard smoking a victory cigar with his father. I approached the mover. I adopted a tone of weary resignation. "Hey," I said. "My brother-in-law stepped out. He said something about settling up with you guys. I just want to make sure you get paid so you can get out of here." "Did he give you cash?" The mover shook his head, tapping the screen of his tablet. "Nah, he put it on a card before we started. Company policy. We take a 50% deposit up front and the rest upon completion. I just need him to sign for the final charge." "Oh, right," I said, leaning casually against the counter. "He puts everything on the family card. Is it the Visa or the Amex? I lose track." The mover didn't even look up. He turned the tablet toward me. "Visa. Ending in 4491. My breath hitched. 4491. The same numbers from the utility email. "Right," I said, my voice steady. "That is the one. Can I see the breakdown? I just want to make sure he tipped you guys enough. He can be cheap." The mover chuckled, warming up to me. "Yeah, he authorized a 20% tip. Here is the invoice." He handed me the tablet. There it was, a charge for $2,400. The billing name was Madison Hudson. The card number was listed with the last 4 digits visible, but I did not have a Visa ending in 4491. I realized then what he had done. He hadn't just used my existing card. He had opened a new credit card in my name. He had likely done it weeks ago, intercepting the mail at my old apartment or using a digital approval. He was paying for the theft of my house with a debt he had taken out in my name. "Thanks," I said. "Let me just capture this for my records. Tax season, you know?" "Sure," the mover said, indifferent. I pulled out my phone and snapped a high-resolution photo of the screen. I captured the transaction ID, the card number, the signature line that said "Signature on file," and the date. "I will go get him for the final signature," I said, handing the tablet back. "Cool." I turned and walked away, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I went straight to the pantry, checking to make sure I was alone. I sent the photo to Avery. He opened a credit card in my name. I typed, "He is paying the movers with it. $2,400. Grand larceny." Avery's response came within seconds. "That is the nail in the coffin. That is federal. Wire fraud and identity theft. Madison. Listen to me closely. Do not confront him. Do not let him know you know. If he realizes you have this, he might destroy the physical card or run." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We wait." Avery wrote, "We let him spend the night. We let him think he is safe. We let him unpack his toothbrush. We need the police to catch him in residence with the stolen goods and the fraudulent instruments. If we strike now, it is a chaotic domestic dispute. If we strike tomorrow morning, it is a raid." I read the words, feeling a cold shiver run down my spine. "One more thing," Avery added. "I have been looking at the structure of the quitclaim he filed, and the lease, and the credit card application inquiries I just pulled on your credit report." "What about them?" This is not amateur hour. "Madison, the language in that lease? It includes a clause for equitable interest. The quitclaim is designed to bypass probate. He is not just trying to live there rent-free." I stared at the phone, the letters blurring slightly. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if you had signed that lease for real, or if that quitclaim had gone through, he would have had the legal right to borrow against the equity of the home. He was going to take out a second mortgage. He was going to strip the equity out of the house in cash and leave you with the debt." I lowered the phone. I looked out the pantry door at Landon, who was now laughing in the living room, pointing at the chandelier. He didn't want a home. He didn't want a place to raise his children. He wanted to turn my sanctuary into an ATM. He wanted to hollow it out. gutted of its value, and leave me with the empty shell. They do not want to live there, I whispered Avery's words to myself, the realization settling over me like a shroud. They want to convert the house into an exploitable asset before you can breathe. I pocketed the phone. I stepped out of the pantry. I put the mask of defeat back on my face. "Landon," I called out, my voice soft and broken. "The movers need you to sign." He turned, grinning. "Coming, sis. See? Painless." Yes, I thought as I watched him walk toward the tablet that would convict him. Painless. I stepped out onto the back patio. Sliding the glass door shut behind me, the noise of the movers wrestling my furniture faded into a dull thudding, replaced by the hum of pool filters and the distant chirp of a sprinkler system. I took a breath of the cool evening air. Steadying my hands, inside, Landon was opening another beer, celebrating a victory he thought was absolute. He believed he had won the war because he had occupied the territory. He did not understand that he had just invaded a fortress that was rigged to explode. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the Larkspur Heights Homeowners Association Security Division. This was a private security firm, not the police, but in a neighborhood like this, they were often more responsive and certainly more protective of property values. "Larkspur Security, dispatch," a voice answered. "This is Madison Hudson," I said, my voice clipped and professional. "Owner of property 104 Wisteria Way. I need to report a violation of the community covenants, conditions, and restrictions, specifically, unauthorized commercial use of a residential property and an unapproved increase in occupancy density. Can you elaborate, Ms. Hudson?" "There are individuals moving into my home who have stated their intent to use the address as a hub for investor meetings and a startup headquarters," I said, using the exact keywords I knew would trigger the HOA's immune response. "They are currently unloading commercial-grade office equipment and creating a nuisance. I need a patrol unit to verify the disturbance and log the violation. We have a unit 2 streets over. We will send them to assess." I hung up and immediately dialed 911. This was the call that terrified me. This was the call that could go wrong in 100 different ways. If I sounded like a hysterical woman screaming about her brother-in-law, they would tell me to take a walk. I had to sound like a victim of a sophisticated crime. "Emergency services, what is your location?" 104 Wisteria Way, I said. "I am reporting an active burglary involving identity theft, forgery of legal documents, and fraudulent habitation. The perpetrators are currently inside the premises. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? Is there a weapon?" "There is no weapon that I have seen," I said. "But they have gained access using stolen credentials and are currently altering the property. I have evidence of financial fraud occurring in real time. I need an officer to secure the scene." "Officers are dispatched." I lowered the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face remained a mask of stone. I turned back to the glass door. Landon was standing there. He had seen me on the phone. He slid the door open. Stepping out onto the patio, the smug grin was gone, replaced by a look of irritation. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. "You better not be ordering more pizza. Mom made a casserole." "I was calling the HOA," I said calmly. "And the police." Landon froze. He looked at me as if I had just spoken in tongues. Then, he let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You called the HOA?" he sneered. "On your own family? What are you going to tell them? That your nephews are too loud? You are pathetic. Madison, you are actually trying to get us fined?" "I am trying to protect my asset," I said. "And since you claimed this is a business location for your investors, I figured the association should know about your commercial enterprise." "You are bluffing," he said, stepping closer, using his height to intimidate me. "You are just trying to scare me. You know that if the cops come, I show them the lease, and they walk away. You are wasting everyone's time. Then you have nothing to worry about," I said. A moment later, the blue and red lights washed over the white stucco of my house. It wasn't just one cruiser, it was 2. A sleek black SUV from the private security firm arrived first. blocking the driveway, followed immediately by a standard patrol car. The silence of the cul-de-sac was shattered by the crackle of radios and the slamming of car doors. Landon's face drained of color for a second, but then the mask slammed back into place. He adjusted his collar, ran a hand through his hair, and turned to me. "Fine," he hissed. "You want a show? I will give you a show. But remember, you started this. When Paige finds out you tried to have her arrested, she will never speak to you again." "That is a risk I'm willing to take," I whispered. We walked around to the front of the house. 2 police officers were walking up the driveway, their hands resting near their belts. A security guard in a tactical uniform stood by the truck, taking notes on a clipboard. Landon walked down the steps to meet them, his arms open, his smile wide and disarming. It was the smile he used on loan officers and elderly investors. "Officers," Landon called out. "Good evening. I am so sorry about this. My sister-in-law is having a bit of a mental health crisis. We are just moving in, and she is having trouble letting go of the property." The lead officer, a man with a gray buzz cut and a name tag that read Sergeant Miller, did not smile back. He stopped 5 feet from Landon. "We received a call about a burglary and identity theft," Miller said. "Who is the homeowner?" "I am," I said, stepping forward. I did not scream. I did not cry. I held out my driver's license and the physical deed I had retrieved from my car. "Madison Hudson, this is my property. These individuals have broken in and are refusing to leave." Landon shook his head, looking at the officer with a "can you believe her" expression. "Officer, nobody broke in. We have a key. Her mother gave it to us. And more importantly, we have a signed lease agreement." He pulled out his phone, bringing up the PDF again. "Here, signed by Ms. Hudson herself, 5-year term. We moved in today. This is a landlord-tenant dispute, plain and simple. She is just having buyer's remorse because she wants the house for herself." Officer Miller looked at the phone, then at me. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. This was the moment Avery had warned me about. This was the pivot point where the law usually shrugged and said, "Take it to civil court." Miller sighed. He looked tired. "Ma'am, if there is a lease, we cannot evict them. You have to go through the magistrate. We do not adjudicate contracts on the sidewalk." Landon smirked. He crossed his arms. "Exactly. Thank you, officer. I told her that." I felt the ground slipping away. My mother, Sharon, and Russell had all gathered on the porch, looking like a chorus of righteous victims. "He is lying," I said, my voice steady. "That document is a forgery. I never signed it, and I can prove it is not a valid instrument." "They all say that," the second officer muttered under his breath. "Officer," I said, locking eyes with Miller, "look at the notary stamp on that digital document. Please, just look at it." Landon rolled his eyes. "Oh my God. Madison, it was notarized by a family friend. It is legit." Miller, perhaps sensing my absolute conviction, or perhaps just wanting to be thorough, leaned in to look at Landon's screen. "Zoom in," Miller commanded. Landon hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pinched the screen to enlarge the bottom of the page. "The notary seal," I said, reciting the information Avery had texted me moments ago. "It says commission expires November 2026. The name is Deborah Vance." "So?" Landon challenged. "Deborah is a great lady. She did us a favor." "Deborah Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the night air like a scalpel. "Died in a car accident 11 months ago. Her commission was revoked posthumously by the state board." The silence that fell over the driveway was absolute. Even the crickets seemed to stop chirping. Landon's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked down at the phone, then back at the officer. That is impossible," he stammered. "I mean, maybe it was her daughter? Maybe I got the name wrong?" "It is a digital stamp," Officer Miller said, his tone dropping an octave. "It does not have typos." He looked at Landon differently now. The boredom was gone from his eyes, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a cop who realizes he's being played. "Sir," Miller said, Did you witness this document being notarized? Well, Paige handled the paperwork. Landon backpedaled, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. My wife. She brought it to me signed. I assumed it was all correct. So you are in possession of a document notarized by a deceased woman? Miller asked. And you are using that document to justify occupying a $700,000 home? Before Landon could answer, the security guard from the HOA stepped forward. Officer, the guard said, I just pulled the residency application that was submitted to the gatehouse this morning, for the gate codes. What about it? Miller asked, not taking his eyes off Landon. It lists the primary resident as Landon Pierce, the guard said. But the request for the mailbox key change? It was signed by a Paige Hudson. We flagged it because the signature on the form does not match the signature we have on file for the deed holder. I stepped in. My sister's name is Paige. She is not on the deed. She has no legal authority to change the mailbox or authorize residency. Officer Miller turned to his partner. Run the name Landon Pierce, and run the vehicle plate on that truck. Landon took a step back. Whoa, hold on. This is a misunderstanding. We can clear this up. Madison, tell them to stop. We will go to a hotel for the night. We can talk about this in the morning. No, I said. We are talking about it now. Sir, the second officer called out from the cruiser, looking at his laptop. I have a flag on the ID. Mr. Pierce has 2 outstanding bench warrants for check fraud in the next county over. And the moving truck? The plates are reported stolen from a rental depot in Jersey. Landon looked like he was going to vomit. The bravado, the CEO speak, the arrogance, it all dissolved, leaving behind a scared, small grifter who had overplayed his hand. That truck isn't mine, Landon shouted, his voice cracking. I hired those guys. I did not know the truck was stolen. I am a victim here too. You paid them, I interjected, looking at the officer. He paid them $2,400 using a credit card he opened in my name without my consent. I have the transaction record and the fraud alert from the bank. Officer Miller turned back to Landon. He rested his hand on his handcuffs. Mr. Pierce, Miller said, his voice cold and hard. At this moment, this is no longer a civil dispute. If that lease is fake, and if you used a fraudulent card to pay for services, you are looking at burglary, forgery, identity theft, and credit card fraud. It is a misunderstanding, Sharon screamed from the porch, rushing down the stairs. He is a good boy. He is a father. Madison, stop this. You are ruining his life. He ruined his own life, I said, not looking at her. I am just handing him the bill. Landon looked at me. For the first time in 10 years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He realized that his charm, his buzzwords, and his family guilt trips had no currency here. He was standing on the precipice, and I was the one who had greased the edge. Step away from the house, sir, Miller ordered, and keep your hands where I can see them. Landon raised his hands, trembling. Paige is going to kill you, he whispered to me as the officer moved in to pat him down. Paige, I said, watching the flashing blue lights reflect in his terrified eyes, is the least of your problems. A silver sedan with tinted windows glided up the driveway, maneuvering smoothly between the police cruiser and the hulking mass of the moving truck. The driver's door opened, and Avery Kincaid stepped out. He did not look like he had been summoned from a Saturday evening dinner. He looked like he had been waiting for this moment his entire career. He adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed the lapel of his charcoal suit, and walked toward us with the focused intensity of a predator who smells blood in the water. Officer, Avery said, his voice projecting a calm, commanding authority that instantly silenced the chaotic chatter on the lawn. I am Avery Kincaid, legal counsel for Ms. Hudson. I have the digital confirmation from Crest Point Title Services regarding the ownership structure of this property. Landon, who was currently sweating through his shirt while Sergeant Miller held on to his identification, tried to rally. We do not need more lawyers. We have a lease. It is a civil matter. Avery did not even look at Landon. He treated him like a piece of furniture that had been placed in the wrong room. He handed a thin file to Sergeant Miller. "You will notice, Sergeant," Avery said, pointing to a highlighted section of the document, "that Ms. Hudson did not purchase this property in her individual name. She purchased it through a qualified personal residence trust, a specific estate planning vehicle. The deed is held by the Madison Hudson QPRT, not Madison Hudson, the individual." I watched Landon's face. He blinked, trying to process the legalese. "Why does that matter?" Landon snapped. "She is the trustee. It is the same thing." "It matters," Avery continued, addressing the officer, "because the fraudulent lease Mr. Pierce is waving around lists the landlord as Madison Hudson, legally speaking. Madison Hudson does not have the authority to lease this property, only the trust does. Any contract not in the name of the trust is void ab initio. On its face, the document is not just a forgery, it is a legal impossibility." Sergeant Miller looked at the paperwork, then at the PDF on Landon's phone. "So even if the signature was real, which we know it is not, the contract is invalid?" "Precisely," Avery said. "But we have more. While I was driving over, my contact at the county recorder's office ran a trace on the digital submission of the quitclaim deed, the one attempting to add Mr. Pierce to the title." Landon shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I told you. I do not know about that. Maybe a glitch. The county uses a system that logs the IP address and the MAC address of the device used to upload documents," Avery said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, conversational level. "The upload came from an iPad Pro, specifically, a device registered to an iCloud account associated with the email address landonpaventures@gmail.com. Avery turned his head slowly to look at Landon. "Is that your email address, Mr. Pierce?" Landon did not answer. He looked like he was trying to swallow a golf ball. "And," Avery added, "the geolocator tag on the upload puts the device right here, in this driveway, at 6:45 this morning." "That is intent," Sergeant Miller said, handing the file back to Avery. "That is a premeditated attempt to alter public records." The net was tightening. I could feel the air pressure in the driveway drop, the gravity of the situation crushing down on the man who had tormented my family for a decade. But we were not done. Miller motioned for his partner to bring the lead mover over. The man looked annoyed, his arms crossed over his chest, clearly realizing that he was not getting paid anytime soon. "Sir," Miller asked the mover, "I need you to clarify something. Who directed you to this address, and what were your instructions regarding the timeline?" The mover spat on the grass, glaring at Landon. "Him, the guy in the polo, he hired us yesterday. Said it was a rush job, triple time for a Sunday start." "Did he say why it was a rush?" Miller asked. "Yeah," the mover said. "He told us we had to get the big furniture inside before noon. He said, 'My sister-in-law is flighty, and I need to get the bed in before she changes her mind.' He said if we got the master bedroom set up, she couldn't kick them out." "Did he mention his wife?" I asked. I needed to know. The mover shrugged. "He was on the phone with his brother mostly. I heard him say something like, 'We gotta get the heavy stuff in before Paige realizes how big the place is.' Said something about her not knowing the full scope." I turned my eyes to Travis, Landon's younger brother. He was sitting on the bumper of the truck, smoking a cigarette with a nervous, jittery energy. He saw me looking and immediately threw the cigarette down, crushing it with his heel. "Travis," I said, "what did Paige not know?" Travis looked at Landon, then at the police, then at his feet. "I do not know. Madison, I just drove the car." "This is a police investigation into felony fraud," Avery interjected smoothly. "If you are withholding information, you become an accessory after the fact." Travis cracked. It was instantaneous. He was not built for pressure. He was built for video games and sleeping on couches. "Landon told me to keep Paige busy," Travis blurted out. "He told me to send her to the school district office and the utility company. He said if she saw the house before we were moved in, she would freak out. He said we had to create facts on the ground. Facts on the ground, I repeated. It was a military term. It meant occupying territory so firmly that negotiation was impossible. She thought you agreed to let us stay in the guest room, Travis mumbled. She didn't know we were taking the master. She didn't know about the lease. Landon told her you guys had a handshake deal for a few weeks. I felt a cold knot in my stomach loosen slightly, only to be replaced by a different kind of horror. Paige wasn't the mastermind. She was the shield. Landon had used her ignorance to buy himself time. He knew that if Paige walked in and saw the movers taking over my entire house, she would have stopped it. So he sent her on errands while he staged the coup. At that exact moment, headlights swept across the lawn. A beige minivan turned into the cul-de-sac. It was a vehicle I recognized instantly. It had a dent in the rear fender from where Landon had backed into a pole 2 years ago. The engine cut out, and the driver's door opened. Paige stepped out. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was clutching a thick manila folder against her chest. She was wearing her mom uniform, yoga pants, and a stained sweatshirt. She looked like a woman who was holding her life together with safety pins and hope. She took 3 steps toward the house before she froze. She saw the police cruisers. She saw the security guard. She saw me standing next to a man in a suit, and she saw her husband standing with his hands behind his back, flanked by a police sergeant. "Landon?" she called out, her voice thin and trembling. "What is going on? Why are the police here?" Landon's face twisted into a mask of desperate victimhood. "Paige, honey, thank God you are here. Madison called the cops. She's trying to kick us out. She's trying to say we broke in." Paige looked at me, her eyes wide with hurt and confusion. "Madison? You called the police? But you said we could stay. Landon told me you offered—" "I never offered." "Paige," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I never agreed to anything. He broke in." "That is a lie," Sharon screamed from the porch. She had been quiet for too long, and now she marched down the steps, pointing a finger at me. "She is lying, Paige. She is jealous. She has always been jealous of you. She sees you with a husband and children, and she cannot stand it because she is alone in this big, empty house. She wants to destroy your happiness to make herself feel better." "Ma'am, step back," Officer Miller warned Sharon. Paige looked between us, the confusion deepening. "But the papers. Landon said you signed the papers." "Show her," I said to the officer. Sergeant Miller walked over to Paige. He held up the phone displaying the PDF of the lease agreement. "Mrs. Pierce," Miller said gently, "your husband claims this is a valid lease signed by your sister. We have reason to believe it is a forgery. But right now, I need you to look at the witness signature." Paige squinted at the screen. She shifted the folder in her arms to hold the phone. "The witness line," Miller pointed. I watched Paige's face closely. I saw the moment the gears turned. I saw the moment the blind faith she had carried for 10 years finally hit the wall of reality. "That says Paige Pierce," she whispered. "Is that your signature, ma'am?" Miller asked. Paige stared at the scrawl on the screen. It was a loop-de-loop, messy signature. It looked nothing like her neat, cursive handwriting. "No," Paige said. The word was soft, barely audible. "Speak up, please," Miller said. "No," Paige said louder, looking up at Landon. "That is not my signature. I never saw this document. I never signed a lease." Landon's face went gray. "Paige, baby, listen. I signed it for you. It was a proxy thing. I just wanted to get the paperwork done so you wouldn't have to worry about it. I was helping you." "Helping me?" Paige asked. Her voice was shaking. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was the vibration of a bridge about to collapse. "You forged my signature? On a legal contract?" "It is just a formality," Landon pleaded. "We are married. What is yours is mine. I was protecting our family." "And the mailbox?" the security guard chimed in, unhelpfully but accurately. "The request to change the mailbox keys was also signed by you, ma'am, or rather, by someone pretending to be you." Paige looked at the folder in her arms. The school registration papers she had spent all afternoon filling out. She looked at the moving truck. She looked at me. "You told me she invited us," Paige said to Landon. "You told me she begged us to come because she was lonely. You told me we were doing her a favor." "She did?" Landon lied. Desperate. "She is just changing her story now because she is off her meds or something. She is unstable. Paige, you know how she gets." I did not say a word. I did not have to. I just stood there, letting the silence amplify his lies. "She is not unstable, Landon," Paige said. "She is the only one of us who has a job." "Paige," Sharon yelled, "do not side with her. She is trying to send your husband to jail." Paige turned to look at her mother-in-law. "He forged my name. Sharon, he forged my name." Then, Paige turned back to Landon. Her eyes were dry, but they were burning with a terrifying intensity. She took a step closer to him, ignoring the police officer who tried to interpose himself. "Landon," she said, "the utility account—" "What?" Landon blinked. "The lady at the utility office," Paige said, her voice steadying. "She told me there was a hold on our old account because of an unpaid transfer fee. She said the account had been flagged for excessive credit checks." Landon swallowed hard. "Clerical error. You know how they are." "She said 3 credit cards had been opened using our old address in the last month." Paige said, "In my name." I watched Landon crumble. It wasn't a physical collapse, but a spiritual one. The air went out of him. His shoulders slumped. The arrogant tilt of his chin vanished. He knew. He knew that she knew. I was going to pay them off," Landon stammered. "Once the startup funding hit, it was bridge capital. Paige, just bridge capital. You used my social security number." Paige said, "It wasn't a question. You used my name to open credit cards because your credit is ruined." "I did it for us," Landon shouted, tears starting to form in his eyes. Tears of self-pity, not remorse. "I need liquidity to build our future. Why can't you see that? I am the visionary here." Paige dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the driveway. Immunization records, report cards, birth certificates, the debris of her children's lives. She looked at me. For a moment, we were just 2 sisters again, stripping away the years of resentment and distance. I saw the apology in her eyes, but more than that, I saw the realization that she had been sleeping next to a stranger. She turned back to Landon. She didn't scream. She didn't attack him. She just asked the question that would end their marriage. "Landon," she whispered, her voice carrying through the night air like a gunshot. "What else? What else have you used my name for?" Landon opened his mouth to lie, but he looked at Officer Miller, then at Avery, then at the recording cameras I had pointed out to the movers. He closed his mouth. The silence was louder than the sirens. Sergeant Miller separated us like boxers in a ring who had forgotten the rules of the sport. He gestured for Landon to stay by the hood of the cruiser, flanked by the silent, imposing figure of the HOA security guard. Then he guided Paige toward the garage door. Away from her husband's hissing whispers, I followed my sister. She was trembling so violently that the papers on the ground, the scattered debris of her children's lives, seemed to vibrate in sympathy. She leaned against the stucco wall of the house, sliding down until she was crouching, her head buried in her hands. It wasn't the cry of a woman who was sad. It was the hyperventilating gasp of a woman who had been holding her breath for 5 years and had finally run out of oxygen. I stood over her, casting a long shadow under the floodlights. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to shake her. I settled for handing her a bottle of water from the cooler Landon had so presumptuously placed on my driveway. "Drink," I said. "You are going to pass out." Paige took the bottle, her fingers fumbling with the cap. She looked up at me. Her mascara smeared into dark bruises under her eyes. "He promised it was just the address," she whispered, her voice a jagged shard of glass. "He swore on the kids' lives. Madison. He said he just needed the mail." "Why, Paige?" I asked, crouching down to be at her eye level. "Why does he need my mail? Why does he need my address? Paige took a gulp of water and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked over at Landon, who was now arguing with Avery, his hands making frantic, chopping motions. "He is drowning," she said softly. "We are drowning. It is not just the credit cards, Madison. It is everything. He owes $40,000 to a hard money lender in the city. He owes the contractor who did the deck on our old rental. There is a lawsuit pending from his last business partner, the coffee roasting thing. They are coming for him." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I knew Landon was incompetent. I didn't know he was radioactive. "So he decided to use me as a shield," I said. "He said he needed a prestige anchor," Paige explained, reciting the terminology Landon must have drilled into her head. "He said if he could show the banks a proof of residence at Larkspur Heights, it would reset his risk profile. He said the algorithms would see the zip code and approve the consolidation loan. He told me we just needed to forward the mail for 3 weeks. He never said we were moving in." "But the truck," I said. "The furniture? The kids' school registration?" "I found out this morning," she admitted, fresh tears spilling over. "At breakfast, he told me the landlord at our apartment was kicking us out early, which was a lie. I know that now, and that you had agreed to let us crash here until the loan cleared. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a solution." I looked at my sister, the former homecoming queen, the one who always had the perfect hair and the perfect smile, and I saw the ruin beneath the facade. She had been living in a house of cards during a hurricane, gluing the pieces back together with silence and denial. She had stayed silent because in our family, and especially in her marriage, admitting failure was a sin worse than theft. She was terrified that if she spoke the truth, that her husband was a fraud and they were broke, the illusion of her perfect life would shatter. "You knew he was using my name," I said. "It wasn't a question." "I knew he was using the address," she corrected, pleading with her eyes. "I didn't know about the credit cards. I didn't know about the forgery. I swear, Madison, I thought he was just bending the rules, not breaking the law." "He broke the law, Paige, and he dragged you into the getaway car." Before she could answer, the sound of screeching tires tore through the quiet neighborhood. A white Lexus SUV jumped the curb, missing my mailbox by inches, and slammed to a halt behind the police cruiser. The driver's door flew open before the engine had even stopped turning over. It was my mother. Carol Hudson did not run. She stormed. She was wearing her silk pajamas under a trench coat, her hair in rollers, her face a mask of absolute, unadulterated panic. But it wasn't fear for our safety. I knew that look. It was fear of the audience. She saw the police lights reflecting off the neighbors' windows. She saw the movers sitting on the lawn. She saw Nora across the street, watching from her porch. "What is happening?" Carol screamed, rushing toward us. "Madison, what have you done?" She didn't run to Paige, the daughter crying on the ground. She didn't run to Landon, the man in handcuffs. She ran to me, the problem. "Lower your voice, Mother," I said, standing up to meet her. "We are in a public street." "You called the police?" Carol hissed, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "On your own family? Have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what this looks like? The neighbors are watching. The Pierce family will hear about this. You are humiliating us. Landon is the one being arrested for felonies. Mom, I think the humiliation belongs to him." "He is a father," she shouted, shaking me. "He is your brother-in-law. You do not call the cops on family. You handle this inside the house. You send everyone away and you talk about it like civilized people. But no, you always have to be the victim. You always have to make it about you and your precious money." It was the same old script. The selfish Madison monologue I had heard 1,000 times. Madison the stingy one. Madison the cold one. Madison who won't share. "He forged my signature, Mom," I said, pulling my arm away. "He stole my identity. He opened credit cards in my name. He tried to steal the deed to my house. Carol waved her hand dismissively, as if I had complained about Landon eating the last piece of cake. Oh, stop being dramatic. He was just trying to get things set up. He's aggressive in business. That is why he's going to be successful. He probably just cut a few corners to get the utilities on for the kids. He did it for the children. Madison, something you wouldn't understand because you are so obsessed with your career, you forgot to have a life. I felt a cold rage crystallize in my chest. It was sharp and clear. Utilities, I repeated. I looked at Avery, who had walked over and was listening with a neutral, professional expression. Then I looked back at my mother. How did he get the information to cut those corners? Mom? I asked softly. I gave him the key, she cried, throwing her hands up. I told you, I just wanted them to be safe. A key opens a door, I said, stepping closer to her. A key does not give him my social security number. A key does not give him the exact legal description of the property required to file a quitclaim deed. A key does not give him the account number for my previous utility provider to transfer the service. Carol froze. Her eyes darted to the side, then back to me. She pulled her trench coat tighter around herself. I do not know what you are talking about, she stammered. You had my folder, I said. 2 weeks ago, at lunch, the closing packet. I left it on the table when I went to the restroom. When I came back, the papers were slightly rearranged. I didn't think anything of it. I was just looking, she defended. I am your mother. I have a right to know what you are buying. Did you take pictures? I asked. Did you scan them? Landon asked me to, she blurted out, the pressure cracking her open. He said he needed the details to help you. He said you were too busy at work to set up the electricity and the water, and he wanted to surprise you by having it all ready. He said, Carol, send me the info. I will handle the admin work for Madison. He was being helpful. So you sent him photos of my deed? I asked. Of my social security card? Of my driver's license? I scanned them and emailed them, she admitted, her voice rising in defensive shrillness. So what? It is just paperwork. He is family. He wasn't going to steal your identity. He was paying your bills. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the crickets seemed to have paused to listen to the confession. Avery stepped forward. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket and clicked his pen. Mrs. Hudson, Avery said, his voice calm but terrifyingly official. My name is Avery Kincaid. I am Madison's attorney. I need you to understand what you have just admitted to in front of a police sergeant. Carol looked at him, blinking rapidly. I didn't do anything wrong. I was helping. You disseminated sensitive personal identification information without the owner's consent, Avery stated. You provided the tools necessary for the commission of wire fraud, credit fraud, and title fraud. By emailing those documents to Mr. Pierce, you became an accessory to identity theft. In the eyes of the law, you didn't just help. You drove the getaway car. Carol's mouth fell open. She looked at the police officer, who was nodding in agreement. She looked at Landon, who was staring at the ground. But I am her mother, she whispered. That is not a legal defense, Avery said. Landon, seeing his support system crumbling, suddenly lunged forward against the hood of the cruiser. Sergeant Miller grabbed his shoulder, but Landon shouted across the driveway, his voice raw and desperate. You think you are so smart, Madison, he yelled. You think you can just pin this all on me? Go ahead. Press charges. See what happens. Is that a threat? Avery asked, not turning around. It is a fact, Landon screamed. Paige and I have joint accounts. We file joint taxes. If I go down for fraud, the assets are frozen. Everything gets seized. If you prosecute me, you bankrupt your sister. She loses the car. She loses the apartment. She loses custody if she cannot support the kids. You want to destroy me? You destroy her too. He was laughing now, a manic, terrified sound. Go ahead. Madison, put your sister on the street. Prove to everyone how much you love family. It was a beautiful, vicious trap. He was using his wife, my sister, as a human shield. He knew I had the money and the legal standing to crush him, but he was betting that I didn't have the stomach to take Paige down as collateral damage. I looked at Paige. She was still crouching against the wall, her face buried in her knees. She was sobbing quietly. She had heard him. She had heard her husband use her destruction as a bargaining chip. I walked over to her. I knelt down on the pavement, ignoring the oil stain that was seeping into the knee of my jeans. "Paige," I said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare. "He is right," Paige whispered. "If he goes to jail, if the accounts are frozen, I have nothing. Madison, I have $17 in my wallet. I do not have a job. I do not have anywhere to go." "You have a choice," I said. I took her hands. They were cold and clammy. "Landon is betting that I will protect you by protecting him," I said. "He thinks I will let him keep the house, keep the credit cards, keep the lie alive, just to stop you from hitting rock bottom. He thinks I am the same Madison who paid your rent 3 years ago." Paige sniffled, gripping my hands. "What do I do? I cannot lose the kids." "You are not going to lose the kids," I said firmly. "But you have to decide right now who you are married to. Are you married to a man, or are you married to a parasite?" I pointed at Landon, who was watching us with a predatory intensity. "He just threatened to ruin you to save himself," I said. "He didn't say, 'Leave Paige out of this.' He said, 'If I burn, she burns.' That is not love. Paige, that is a hostage situation." Paige looked at Landon. She looked at the man she had defended for 10 years, the man she had lied for, the man she had borrowed money for, and for the first time, she seemed to see the wire rigged to the explosives strapped to her chest. "If you stand up now," I said, my voice low and urgent, "if you tell the police that you did not sign that lease, that you did not know about the credit cards, that you are a victim of his fraud too, then you are a witness. You are not an accomplice. You are separate from him." "But I will have nothing," she cried. "You already have nothing," I said, shaking her hands slightly. "He spent it all. The money is gone. The credit is ruined. The only thing you have left is your name, and he is trying to steal that too." I stood up and pulled her with me. She was heavy, dead weight, but she rose. "It is time to choose, Paige," I said, looking her in the eye. "Do you stand with the truth, or do you stand with the man who is using you as a ticket to stay in my house?" Paige looked at me. Then she looked at our mother, who was chewing her lip, terrified of the scandal. Then she looked at Landon. Landon smiled at her, a weak, encouraging smile. "Paige, baby, tell her we are a team. Tell her to send the cops away." Paige took a deep breath. She let go of my hands. She took one step forward, her legs shaking but her chin lifting just an inch. She looked at the police officer. "Officer?" she said. "Yes, ma'am?" Miller responded. "I would like to make a statement," Paige said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not waver. "I did not sign the lease, and I want to report 3 unauthorized credit cards opened in my name." Landon's scream of rage was cut short as Sergeant Miller spun him around and slammed him against the hood of the car. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the cul-de-sac like the final period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Carol gasped and covered her mouth. I didn't look at Landon. I looked at my sister. She was standing alone on the driveway, shivering, broke, and terrified. But she was standing. "It is over," I told her. "No," she whispered, looking at the moving truck that still held half her life. "It is just starting." The blue and red lights of the police cruisers were no longer just a warning. They were a beacon drawing the attention of the entire neighborhood. Curtains twitched in the windows of the houses across the street. Porch lights flickered on. The social fabric of Larkspur Heights, which relied on discretion and silence, was being torn apart in my driveway. and my mother was frantically trying to stitch it back together with lies. I watched Carol Hudson pacing near the mailbox, her phone pressed to her ear. She was not calling a lawyer to help her son-in-law. She was calling Aunt Martha. She was calling my cousin Brenda. She was launching a preemptive strike on the family gossip mill. "It is a misunderstanding," I heard her hiss into the phone, her voice pitched high enough for the neighbors to hear. "Madison is having some sort of episode. She called the police on Landon because he moved a sofa into the wrong room. Yes, the police. I know. It is hysterical. We are trying to calm her down." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Hello, Joyce? You will not believe what Madison is doing. She is evicting her own sister. On a Sunday night. Yes, she is screaming at the officers. I think the stress of the new job finally broke her." I stood there, calm and motionless, listening to her paint me as the villain in my own tragedy. 10 years ago, this would have destroyed me. I would have begged her to stop. I would have apologized to Landon just to make my mother lower her voice. But tonight, her words felt like rain on a waterproof coat. They slid right off. "Let her talk," Avery said quietly, standing beside me. "Every lie she tells to a third party right now is evidence of her complicity. She is establishing a narrative of denial while standing at a crime scene." Avery held a tablet in his hands. He was tapping the screen with a rhythmic, lethal precision. "We have enough for the initial report," Avery said to Sergeant Miller. "I have compiled the digital evidence package. Item 1 is the video recording of Mr. Pierce admitting to the setup to defraud the Homeowners Association. Item 2 is the sworn statement from the moving company regarding the rush order to establish tenancy before the owner arrived. Item 3 is the fraudulent credit card transaction used to pay for said movers." Sergeant Miller nodded, looking at the tablet. "And the quitclaim deed?" "Item 4, Avery said. "We have the timestamp, the IP address, and the geolocation tag linking the upload to Mr. Pierce's device. Located on this property, that is a direct attempt to alter land records. In this jurisdiction, that is a Class C felony." Miller walked back over to where his partner was standing with Landon. They had separated him from the rest of us, placing him near the trunk of the patrol car. Landon looked small. The bluster was gone. He was no longer the CEO of a non-existent startup. He was a man trying to talk his way out of a bear trap. "Mr. Pierce," Miller said, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "You stated earlier that you arrived at 4 in the afternoon to help your sister-in-law unpack. Is that still your statement?" Landon licked his lips. "Yes, absolutely. We rolled in around 4, maybe 4:15. "And you claim you had verbal permission to enter?" "Implied permission," Landon corrected, grasping at legal straws. "We are family. Family does not need a written invitation." Miller looked at his notebook. Then he looked at the HOA security guard, who was standing by the gatehouse intercom system. "Officer," the guard said, holding up a printout. "I have the transponder log for the community gate, a moving truck with New Jersey plates, followed by a white sedan registered to Landon Pierce, entered the main gate at 5:12 in the morning." Landon froze. 5:12 in the morning," Miller repeated. "That is not coming to help unpack. That is a dawn raid. You entered under cover of darkness, 12 hours before the homeowner was expected to arrive." We wanted to get a head start," Landon stammered. "I wanted to surprise her." "You certainly did that," Miller said dryly. "But here's the problem. Mr. Pierce, if you were just helping, why did you instruct the movers to prioritize the master bedroom? And why did you tell the gate guard you were the primary resident?" "I never said that," Landon lied. "We have audio at the kiosk," the guard interrupted. "It is recorded. You said, 'I am Landon Pierce, the new owner. My sister-in-law is just the financier.'" Landon flinched as if he had been slapped. The contradictions were piling up around him, building a wall he could not climb over. He had lied to the police, lied to the HOA, lied to his wife, and lied to me. And now, the truth was closing in from every angle. While Landon was suffocating in his own deceit, I saw Paige sitting on the edge of the retaining wall. She had her phone in her hand, the screen casting a pale blue glow on her tear-streaked face. She wasn't looking at social media. She was looking at her banking app. She scrolled, she tapped, and then she stopped. She let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. It was the sound of the final illusion shattering. "Paige?" I asked, walking over to her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with a horror that had nothing to do with the police. "The joint savings," she whispered. "The account for the kids' college? The one we promised never to touch?" "What about it?" "It is zero," she said. 0.00. She turned the phone toward me. The transaction history showed a series of withdrawals over the last 3 weeks. Transfers to Crypto.com, transfers to DraftKings, and one large transfer. Processed yesterday. "Look at the memo line," Paige said, her voice shaking. I looked. The transfer was for $2,400. The memo read, "Reimbursement. Moving Co." I felt a wave of nausea. Landon had paid the movers with the credit card he fraudulently opened in my name, but he had also withdrawn the exact same amount from his joint account with Paige, labeling it as a reimbursement. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen from her to pay himself back for the money he stole from me. He had double-dipped on his own crime. He treated the women in his life not as people, but as rotating lines of credit. "He told me he paid the movers with a bonus," Paige said, staring at the screen. "He took the last of the money we had, and he paid himself. He is a parasite. Paige," I said softly. "He feeds until there is nothing left." At that moment, Carol broke away from her phone call and rushed toward us. She had sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She saw the police officer closing his notebook with a decisive snap. She saw the way Paige was looking at Landon, not with worry, but with revulsion. "Madison, please," Carol begged, grabbing my hands. Her palms were sweating. "You have made your point. You scared him. That is enough. Tell the officers you do not want to press charges. Tell them it was a family dispute. If you let them arrest him, think about what people will say. Think about your sister's reputation at the church. Think about the Christmas party." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had given away the keys to my sanctuary because she could not bear to see her favorite child struggle, even if it meant sacrificing me. "Reputation?" I asked. "Yes, we are Hudsons. We do not have criminal records," Carol cried. "Just let him go. He will leave. I will make him leave. Do not drag this into the court system." I pulled my hands away from her. "Reputation does not pay the mortgage, Mom. Reputation does not feed Paige's children, and reputation certainly does not excuse 5 counts of felony fraud." "You are being cruel," she shouted. "You are destroying this family over a house." "I am not destroying the family," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I am evicting the cancer that has been killing it for 10 years. Reputation does not nourish people. Mom, the truth does, and the truth is, your son-in-law is a criminal." Avery stepped in between us, acting as a physical barrier. "Mrs. Hudson, I would advise you to step back. Impeding a complainant during an investigation is not a wise move." Landon, seeing his mother-in-law fail, decided to try one last desperate gamble. He pulled away from the patrol car and took a step toward me, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. "Madison," he called out. "Wait, listen to me." Sergeant Miller put a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Stay back. Just let me talk to her," Landon pleaded. "Madison, look, I get it. I overstepped, okay? I messed up. I will sign whatever you want. I will sign a paper saying I have no rights to the house. I will leave tonight. I will take the truck and go. Just tell the lawyer to drop the fraud thing. Let's keep this civil. For Paige." He was trying to trade a concession he did not own for a freedom he did not deserve. He was offering to give back the house he didn't own in exchange for immunity. I looked at Avery. Avery adjusted his glasses and looked at Landon with pure disdain. "Mr. Pierce," Avery said, "you cannot negotiate with leverage you do not have. You have already filed the fraudulent quitclaim deed with the county. The document is in the system. The crime is completed. You cannot undo a felony just because you were caught before the ink dried." "I can withdraw it," Landon insisted. "I can claim it was an error." "And the credit cards?" I asked. "Was that an error too? Was draining Paige's savings an error?" Landon's eyes darted to Paige. He saw the phone in her hand. He saw the look on her face, and he knew. He knew she had seen the bank account. "Paige," he whispered, "I can explain." "No," Paige said. She stood up. She didn't look at him. She looked at the officer. "You cannot explain zero." Sergeant Miller turned to me. "Ms. Hudson, because of the complexity of the financial crimes and the need to verify the bank records with a warrant. We are referring the felony charges to the Fraud Detective Division. They will likely issue a formal arrest warrant by tomorrow morning, once a judge reviews the evidence package." "So he walks free tonight?" I asked, frustration tightening my chest. "He is not walking anywhere on this property," Miller said firmly. "We are issuing a criminal trespass warning immediately. He has 10 minutes to remove his personal vehicle. The moving truck stays as evidence until we can inventory it. If he sets foot on this driveway again, he will be arrested on sight." Miller turned to Landon. "You are leaving, now, without your wife, without your children, and without any of the items in that house." "But my laptop is in there," Landon protested. "My files." "Your files are evidence," Miller said. "Get in your car, Mr. Pierce, or get in mine. Your choice." Landon looked around the circle. He looked at Sharon and Russell, who were silent and shrinking away from the shame. He looked at Carol, who was weeping into a tissue. He looked at Paige, who was staring through him. And finally, he looked at me. For years, Landon had looked at me with amusement. He had seen me as a resource to be mined, a pushover to be manipulated, a lonely woman who should be grateful for his attention. But now, under the harsh glare of the floodlights, his expression changed. There was no amusement. There was no manipulation. There was only the cold, stark realization that he was looking at a stranger. He was looking at a woman he could not charm, could not bully, and could not control. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that I was not just Paige's little sister. I was the wall he had crashed his life into. "You will regret this," he whispered, venom dripping from every word. "I doubt it," I said. He turned, got into his white sedan, and slammed the door. The engine roared to life, and he reversed violently out of the driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt as he sped away into the darkness, leaving his family, his lies, and his stolen furniture behind. I watched his taillights disappear. The silence that rushed back into the cul-de-sac was deafening. "He will be back," Avery said, closing his file. "I know," I said. "But tomorrow, we change the locks, and tomorrow, the detectives start digging." I turned to Paige. "Come inside," I said, "not as a tenant, as a guest." Paige nodded slowly. She walked toward the front door, passing the piles of boxes that were meant to be her new life, and stepped into the house that had almost destroyed us both. The sun rose over Larkspur Heights at 6 in the morning, casting a stark, unforgiving light on the wreckage of my driveway. The soft, golden hour that real estate agents love to talk about did not exist today. Instead, the light felt clinical, like an operating theater where a tumor was about to be excised. I stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the finale of the play Landon had tried to direct, but this time, the script had been rewritten. A new truck had arrived, but it was not bringing more of Landon's junk. It was an enforcement team overseen by the Sheriff's Department Civil Division. Because of the felony charges filed overnight and the immediate restraining order Avery had secured from an emergency judge, the eviction process that usually takes months had been compressed into hours. The lease was void. The tenants were trespassers, and the property was being purged. The movers, the same crew from yesterday, looking even more exhausted and annoyed, were hauling the beige leather sofa back out to the front door. They were moving in reverse, a rewind of the invasion. "Careful with the door frame," I said, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "We know, lady," the lead mover grunted. "We just want to get paid and get out of here." Landon was standing by the curb, his hands zip-tied in front of him. He hadn't been taken to jail the night before due to a processing delay, but he was currently in the custody of 2 officers who were supervising the removal of his property. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His polo shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and the confident CEO swagger had completely evaporated. He tried, one last time, to play the card that had always worked for him. "This is illegal!" Landon shouted, turning toward the officers. "I told you, this is a civil dispute. You cannot kick a man out of his home without a 30-day notice. I have rights. I am a tenant." Avery Kincaid stepped off the porch. He looked fresh, sharp, and utterly unbothered by the morning heat. He walked down the driveway and held up a document. "Mr. Pierce," Avery said, his voice cutting through the noise of the truck's hydraulic lift. "You seem to be confused about the definition of a tenant. A tenant is someone who enters a property with a valid contract. You entered with a forgery." "It is not a forgery," Landon insisted, though his voice cracked. "It is a digital signature. It holds up in court." "Not when the notary public has been dead for a year," Avery said, handing a verified affidavit to the lead officer, "and not when the rent was paid using a stolen identity. We have the report from the fraud division this morning. The credit card you used to secure the movers? It has been flagged as a fraudulent instrument. By using it to facilitate your move, you committed wire fraud. That invalidates any claim to tenancy you might think you have. You are not a resident. Landon, you are a crime scene." The door to the loophole slammed shut with a metallic finality. Landon slumped against the patrol car, realizing that his legal jargon could not save him from the math of his own crimes. On the other side of the lawn, Sharon was losing her mind. She was pacing back and forth, clutching a box of kitchen appliances that the movers had unceremoniously dumped on the grass. When she saw Landon defeated, she turned her fury on me. "You are heartless!" Sharon screamed, her voice shrill enough to wake the remaining neighbors. "Look at him! Look at what you are doing to your family! He is the father of your niece and nephew. How can you stand there and drink coffee while you ruin his life?" "I didn't ruin his life, Sharon," I said calmly. "I just stopped him from ruining mine." "He was trying to build something," she yelled. "He made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. But you are vindictive. You are jealous because you have nobody to come home to. So you want to make sure Paige doesn't have anyone either." Russell, Landon's father, stepped forward. He tried to summon the gravitas of a patriarch, puffing out his chest. "Now listen here, Madison," Russell rumbled. "You need to show some respect. We are your elders. We are family. You can't just throw us out on the street like garbage. You let us stay until we find a place. That is the decent thing to do." I looked at Russell. I looked at the man who had urinated on the side of my house yesterday. "Respect is earned, Russell," I said. "And as for staying? No. The owner of the property has refused entry, and since I am the sole owner, my word is the only law that matters on this acre." "You will regret this," Russell spat. "You will die alone in this big house." "Better to die alone than to live with thieves," I replied. Avery signaled to the officer. "The personal property has been removed to the curb. We are requesting that the individuals be removed from the premises immediately." But there was one final piece of business. Paige was standing by the garage. She was holding a clipboard that the detective had given her. She looked pale, ghosts haunting her eyes, but her hand was steady. Landon saw her. He saw the pen in her hand. "Paige!" he called out, desperation leaking from his voice. "Don't sign anything. Whatever they are giving you, don't sign it. We can fix this. I will explain everything." Paige looked up. She looked at the husband who had forged her name. She looked at the man who had drained their children's college fund to pay for a moving truck to steal her sister's house. "There is nothing to explain. Landon," she said. She signed the paper. It was a sworn affidavit confirming that she had no knowledge of the lease, that her signature was forged, and that she was pressing charges for the identity theft regarding the credit cards. With that signature, Landon's last defense, the idea that this was a marital misunderstanding, evaporated. He wasn't a misunderstood husband anymore. He was a predator who had been disowned by his prey. Landon watched her hand the clipboard back to the detective. His face went slack. He realized, finally, that the con was over. The game piece he had relied on the most, Paige's blind loyalty, had been removed from the board. The detective, a man named Detective Vance, who had arrived 20 minutes prior, walked over to me and Avery. He lowered his voice. "Ms. Hudson," Vance said, "I thought you should know. When we ran Mr. Pierce's prints and the MO through the system, we got a hit from a case 3 years ago in Nevada." "Nevada?" I asked. "Similar setup," Vance said. "He moved into a vacation rental, claimed he had a lease to purchase, and squatted for 8 months. He stripped the copper wiring out of the walls before they finally got him out. But that time, he used a fake name, so the charges didn't stick to his real ID. This time, he used his real name. He used your real address. He got arrogant." I felt a chill run down my spine despite the morning sun. "So I wasn't the first." "No," Vance said, "but because you documented everything, the video, the notary stamp, the credit card receipt, you are going to be the one who ends it. He left too many fingerprints this time. We have him on 5 counts of felony fraud. He is going away for a while." I looked at Landon one last time. He wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. He was looking at me with the confusion of a man who tries to walk through a door and walks into a wall instead. He had spent his life believing he could talk his way out of anything. He had finally met a silence he couldn't fill. The officers escorted him into the back of the squad car. The door slammed shut. The engine roared. And just like that, he was gone. Sharon and Russell scrambled to load their boxes into their own cars, shooting venomous looks at me but saying nothing. They knew the power dynamic had shifted. They were no longer the guests of honor. They were collateral damage. As the dust settled, my mother, Carol, walked up the driveway. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her face was puffy. She stopped a few feet away from me. She didn't try to hug me. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know about the other house in Nevada. I didn't know he stole the college money." "You didn't want to know," I said. "I just wanted the family to be together," she said, tears leaking from her eyes. "I just wanted peace, Madison. I thought if I helped him, if I gave him the key, everything would settle down. I just wanted everyone to be okay." "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with the release of years of frustration. "Peace like that? Peace at the expense of my safety? That isn't peace. That is just paving the road for one child with the body of the other. You were willing to let him cannibalize me just to keep Paige's illusion alive." Carol sobbed, covering her mouth. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." "I accept your apology," I said, "but things are going to change. I am changing the locks today. You will not get a key. Not for emergencies. Not for watering plants. Never again," she nodded, accepting the sentence. "And going forward," I continued, "if you want to see me, you call first. If you bring up Landon, or if you ask for money for legal fees, the visit ends immediately." "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." I turned to Paige. She was standing by her beige minivan, looking at the empty space where the moving truck had been. She looked like a survivor of a shipwreck who had washed up on a strange shore. "I am sorry," Paige said. She didn't look at me. She looked at the house. "I should have known. I should have asked." "You were surviving," I said. "He made sure you were too busy treading water to look at the horizon." "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I have no money. I have no husband. I have 2 kids who are going to be asking where their dad is. You have a sister, I said. And you have a guest room. For a few weeks. Until you get on your feet. Paige looked at me, shocked. After everything? You would let me stay? I am not letting you stay to enable you, I said firmly. I am giving you a base of operations. But here's the deal. Paige, you get a job. Any job. You separate your finances completely. You file for divorce. And you stand on your own 2 feet. I will help you up. But I will not carry you. Paige straightened her back. It was a small movement, but it was there. I can do that, she said. I want to do that. Good, I said. Then let's go inside. 2 hours later, the locksmith arrived. He was a cheerful man who whistled while he worked. I watched him remove the cylinder of the front door lock, the lock my mother had opened, the lock Landon had violated. He replaced it with a heavy-duty, high-security mechanism that felt solid and heavy in my hand. Here you go, ma'am, he said, handing me 3 fresh keys. Nobody gets in unless you want them to. I took the keys. They felt cold and real. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning. It was a ritual. I scrubbed the marble island where Landon had eaten his pizza. I vacuumed the carpets where the movers had walked. I wiped down the walls where they had hung their ugly pictures. I was scrubbing away their DNA, their entitlement, their noise. I reconnected the security cameras. I changed the Wi-Fi password to a string of 30 random characters. I hung my own curtains, sheer white linen that caught the afternoon light and turned it into a soft glow. By sunset, the house was silent. The boxes were gone. The truck was gone. The police were gone. Paige had taken the kids to get ice cream, giving me a moment of solitude. I sat in the center of my living room on the floor, because I hadn't unpacked my own chairs yet. I listened. I heard the hum of the refrigerator. I heard the wind in the oak trees outside. I heard the settling of the house's timber. I didn't hear demands. I didn't hear guilt trips. I didn't hear the scratching of a pen on a forged check. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of safety. It was full of ownership. I looked around at the walls I had bought with my own sweat and grit. I realized that Landon was wrong. He thought a house was just an asset to be leveraged, a thing to use. But as I sat there, breathing in the scent of lemon cleaner and freedom, I understood. This house wasn't just property. It was a boundary. It was a fortress. It was the answer to the question I'd been asking myself for 10 years. Am I enough? The silence answered back. Yes. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing after a long day? Please let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy reading about where our community is from. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Helena Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.